for somebody with a little more experience to show up, especially at first. Those first few months were crazy. This was in Tanout, the other village that we would go to and set up. We do a few basic blood tests, like we could test for cholesterol, and we could test for uric acid and blood sugar and a few other minor tests. And we do a lot of basic assessments, and we talked about health with people a lot. Hypertension was a big deal. Thyroid issues. They had a real problem, especially in the area I was in. They had a lot of problems with thyroid issues. They still have them. A lot of people had goiters from hyper and hypothyroidism. It was very interesting. There was a lot of people, and they're very poor. The daily wage is about $1.50, $2, and that's like a good wage. Like, you're making good money if you make $2 an hour a day, $2 a day there. But they were able to get by on it. I mean, here I think you would starve to death on it, but there you could get by. We had a few older grandmas who would gather up water bottles, and you could sell a kilo of water bottles for 500 real, which is about 12.5 cents. And they would do that. You would see these little old grandmas who were like 70, 80. They'd have these big old bags of stuff on their head. And then every once in a while they'd see a water bottle, and they'd take down the bag, and pick up the water bottles, and then they'd pick up the bag again and walk off all stooped over. It was, and I asked one of them if she minded doing it, and she was like, no, it keeps me busy. And they would, what was really amazing to me is they were very generous people. We had one grandma she came over and fussed at us a lot. Cranky grandma, we called her. Because she just came over and fussed at us all the time. And she spoke in a mixture of Cham and Khmer. So I really did not understand much of what she was saying, but I understood enough to know that she was fussing at us about, we didn't keep the house quite clean enough for her, and we needed to make sure we were letting this cow down the road not come onto our land. We didn't have any sort of responsibility over that. That was the neighbor's fault, but she didn't care about that. She was like, this cow, why is this cow on your land? And she was an interesting soul, and she would come over, and she didn't really, I don't know if she had a touch of dementia, or she had some interesting health problems, but we kind of tended to take care of her and a few other of the older grandmas who couldn't really get by. We'd provide rice out of our personal store, or give them a little money to help them get by. And in return, she would come over and fuss at us and bring us little treats every once in a while. And I liked a lot of their treats, but I will say they do some very creative things with bananas, because bananas are ubiquitous there. And sometimes I didn't really like it very much. So it was a lot of very polite trying it, and, oh yes, it's so good, I'm full already right now, I'll save it for later. But, this was a gentleman. This was much later in my year. I stayed on later than my roommate Leah did, and helped Josh and Stephanie Lewis get settled down to a village after the Hutchisons went back on furlough in April. And this gentleman, he had his toe amputated at one of the larger hospitals. And then he and his family, for whatever reason, I was never entirely sure why, decided to leave early, possibly because they didn't think it was helping, or because they needed to get back, and he seemed like he was doing okay. So they brought him back, and the toe got very infected, and it was oozing. I'll spare the non-medical people. It was not a pleasant sight when we first started treating him, but we treated him with charcoal poultices, because that's about all we had, honestly. And I had some silver iodine that I also packed in there. And then we did antibiotics, and we taught them very basic hygiene, how to wash your hands with soap and water right before you clean it, and make sure you have a clean bowl and a clean spoon, and that you washed the clean bowl and clean spoon with soap and water, not just water, right before you cleaned it out, and that you should heat up this water that you're washing your spoons with, because that would also help clean your dishes. So in some ways they're Their education system is trying really hard, but in other ways, especially in the villages, very basic things like that. Like, you need to wash your hands with soap and water. That's groundbreaking news. They're like looking at you. We had a whole family gathered around while we're trying to teach this guy, and they're all looking at each other like, and then looking at their hands like, what do you mean we have to wash our hands with soap and water? So it's just like fighting against that level of illiteracy. And they're very smart people. It's not like they're not smart, but nobody has ever told them this. Nobody has ever, I don't think they've had a basic sanitation class before, which is really sad because a lot of them will end up dying of infectious diseases way before they need to, especially their young children and their older adults, the more vulnerable populations. This guy, that was a very proud moment for me. I'm sorry, I'll cover up that picture now. I understand. Everyone who's not medical is like, ugh. But we were very proud of that toe. That toe healed up nicely. This is a hospital in the capital that we would take people to for more complicated procedures than our little referral clinic were able to handle. And hospitals, this was an area for family to wait outside the hammock, and I think they brought that little cot thing. So the hospitals, they provided the medical attention, but they didn't provide any care. Your family had to come along and bring you water, food, blankets. If you wanted a mat to go on the hard metal cot, your family had to, or you had to provide that as well. It was a very interesting medical situation. This was a public hospital. And very shortly after this, I definitely saw a rat run across the road. So, yeah, sanitation, even in the capital, was a little bit of a, they knew about it in the capital, but just trying to enforce it and keep it in practice, it's very difficult in that kind of environment, in that kind of third world country, to keep people accountable, to keep people doing what they need to be doing. This was a hospital I'm blanking on the name. This was a hospital in a town about 40 minutes from us. It was for this woman who had had tuberculosis, and she was recovering, but she kept on getting sick again. So that was her at the hospital and us visiting. And the girl on the left there, right next to her sitting down, that's Jamie Hutchison, one of the missionary children. And this was this little boy that was brought to us. He was about a year and a half. We think he had dwarfism. He had some little minor medical thing that he needed help with. A lot of it was very simple stuff like, my child has a fever, what do I do? Do I stop giving them water? Do I layer them with blankets while it's 98 degrees? That will help, right? So we provided very basic education for a lot of people. Like, I have hypertension, what should I do? I've been told that I have high cholesterol, but I don't know what to do to make that better. Nobody has ever told me what to do. Or I'd have people who'd come in and they'd have like gout symptoms because their diet is not the best. A lot of very cheap snack foods are available, but they're not healthy. And then their other basic diet is fish and rice and some vegetables and very fried food. And I mean, honestly, I ate a lot of fried food while I was over there because with fried food comes less risk of parasites. So it was kind of hard to know the balance, but we tried really hard to make sure that we were discussing things with people at their level and helping them out at their level. I think one of the most difficult situations I had was later on, I did a home visit by myself to this family because they said their mother was very, very ill, and they really wanted me to come see her. And I was initially in that village. This is kind of how home visits go. You show up to visit one person, and then somebody else will show up and be like, well, while you're here, my uncle's aunt's cousin has this issue. Can you come see him? So then I would like mosey over and see the uncle's aunt's cousin. And then while I was there, somebody would be like, well, my mother. So I'd mosey over and see that person. really, I think God helped me a lot with the language, because looking back on it, it's amazing that I was able to understand so much so quickly. I was there for about 8 months and then doing home visits on my own and able to get by pretty well. I mean, I was still like, they had to communicate with me at a very basic level. And I definitely relied on Google Translate and a couple of different apps to help me out, but it was a very difficult thing trying to provide medical treatment in a second language, fresh out of nursing school. I'm not sure that I would actually recommend it, but hey, God was there, and I'm pretty sure it was him providing the care and me just acting as a voice, because even looking back at it, I'm like, I had no idea what I was doing all the time. It was a real issue. But I think the most difficult situations were the ones where we couldn't help people. So I had this particular day, I had this woman who was dying of uterine cancer, and they had gone to Phnom Penh, and they gave her her first round of chemo and then sent her back home with her family and told them, well, if she's filling up to it, come in 4 weeks. But she had stage 4 uterine cancer. I kind of read and translated the French document that the hospital had sent home with them. But they hadn't told her that she had stage 4 uterine cancer and was in fact dying, because nobody tells people that you're dying. It's not considered a polite thing to do. So I, as like a Western medical professional, probably did something culturally taboo and was like, well, I'm just gonna tell her anyway, because there's not a lot I can do for her besides treat her pain, because she's in horrible pain. And she did, she died a few days later. But I don't know, like that kind of situation, I was able to start a relationship with the family, and the missionaries that I was with met the family and was able to get a relationship going with them. And that's a lot of what we did, just build relationships with people, even in like very sorrowful times in their lives. So even when we couldn't help them beyond just explain things to them, because they come from a village, and there is a little bit of a stigma. In the capital, they're a little bit more educated, they know what's happening a little more, and they're like, oh, these country bumpkins. And they don't always treat them the best. So we would come along as like these oblivious foreigners and be like, well, they really need the help, and they have in your country, this is what happens when poor people need help, right? Well, yeah, this is what happens usually. So I would just kind of stand there, even though I really spoke barely any language, and then, I don't know, it would get things done because I was a foreigner. But we couldn't always help people. I felt very bad for her family. I'm still kind of praying for them every once in a while. I don't know. That kind of situation is very difficult to know if I was any help, even just being there and explaining things to them. You know, that's one of those moments you still think about it every once in a while. Like, was I a help by telling them? Should I have just continued the lie that, oh yeah, she's going to be fine, just keep on treating her, let her rest? I don't know. One way or another, God knows. Sometimes you just try your best. And in my evenings, about 4 days a week, the bane of my existence, I am not a teacher. I really am not a teacher. It was never my aspiration. I have a lot of admiration for teachers, especially for teachers of smaller children. I can't do it. It's not my forte. That was a thing I think I prayed even more about than the medical work, because I just didn't like it. I taught English for the Cham and Khmer children in Tanout 4 days a week. I had 2 classes at 4:30 and 5:30, and it was very difficult, and I really didn't like it. It provided a lot of opportunity to meet the families and to introduce children to even basic things about Jesus, like Jesus loves you. I would sing English songs in front of them. I met their families. It was a lot of like networking ability, and I was very thankful that we were able to do it, but I didn't like being the one who was doing it. But again, I think, you know, you can say that you can't do a lot of things, and then in the middle of the year you'll be like, okay, here I am doing what I said I couldn't do. So that was a large part of my year there. It was a lot of like, well, I don't think I can do this. Okay, we're doing this. let's do it. And off we'd go. And that was me trying to maintain some sort of order in the classroom, actually. I don't know if you could see. My hand is raised. I'm going, shh, please, be quiet. And I was trying to speak mostly English, but it didn't work all the time. I tried to not speak too much Khmer. That was my Khmer class. It was very difficult to get the Khmer and the Cham children to take a picture together, so I finally just threw up my hands and got a picture with the Khmer children. And then the Cham children, I don't know what happened to the Cham picture. I have it somewhere. I can't find it, but they were very sweet. There's some of my girls. The one over here on the left, the one who's doing the peace sign at the camera, she was very precocious. She would come in early, hello teacher, how are you? And ask me questions. She wanted to know about America. She spoke a little more English than some of the others. And she was very curious about like air conditioning and cold. They all had no concept of what real cold was. It would be, I think the coldest it got was like 59, and they all came in all bundled up and layered up, and they're like, teacher, it's like America. And I'm like, nope, this is not America. But that was their concept of cold. And I will say, in the middle of the year, when it got down to about 59, 60 degrees, I was dying. It was so cold. I layered up too. I was right there with them. It was so, so cold. It felt like a winter storm had come through. It only lasted about a week and a half, 2 weeks, but I will say it was rather nice in the moment. I kind of enjoyed the cold. It was a nice break. And then back came the unrelenting heat. The people were amazing. I mean, really very friendly, very open, willing to speak with this poor foreigner who's fumbling through learning their language. I think the first time I went to the market, I asked for 50 butts instead of 50 heads of lettuce. Or no, 50, what was I asking for? Something that I wanted 50 of. And the whole street was watching me because I was like the one white person within like a 2-mile radius. And this whole street busts out laughing, and I don't know what I said wrong in the moment, and so I'm like sitting there and I tried to say it again, and then they start laughing even harder. And finally our mission family got there and explained to me, no, Lauren, no. And then I did discover a curse word on accident once. It's very close to chewy. Chewy is help. So I was like trying to say to somebody that I wanted to help them, but I was actually saying something extremely rude and really offensive, and I had no idea. And I kept on saying it like that. And I finally, one of the older ladies sat me down. She's like, "Honey, just don't say it like that. Say it like this, and never ever say it like that." So it was a lot of that. I still don't even know what it was I said, but I never again said it like that. It's always chewy, never anything else. It was a lot of learning like that, but they were very patient people. They live a very sedentary lifestyle. They get up, they fish, they come home, they eat rice 3 times a day, and that's their life. These were 3 teachers I met in Mandaluyong, and they all spoke varying degrees of English, which was very refreshing. I never fully understood until I went overseas where nobody speaks English how much I rely on language and the ability to communicate with people beyond a very, hi, how are you? Basic level. So it was very fun for me to meet anyone that I could talk to. And I was probably a little bit of a chatterbox with anyone who spoke English because I was a little bit starved for communication. This was Ming Om Ni. Ming is aunt. We call everyone auntie and uncle, grandma and grandpa. Ming Om Ni was one of the first Adventists in Geelong. She brought her child for help to Bo. She was Khmer, and Bo was able to help her grandchild, and she started talking to them. She was going to a Sunday church at the time, but she wasn't very happy at it. She just said there was a lot of rules, and they didn't seem, and the pastor would go out and get really drunk, and there wasn't a lot of spiritual growth there. And so she started talking to Bo, and she started discovering more about the Bible, and they gave her a Khmer Bible she was able to read. And she was one of the first baptized members of the Khmer people. She's a very special lady. She helps people out around her. She travels to the capital every once in a while. She's a business lady. And right now, I had a bit of a headache. I think I had parasites at the time in that picture. And she was doing something called coining. Anyone know what coining is? Coining is where you take a coin of some sort, and then they'll take like tiger balm, probably tiger balm, some sort of oil, and then they'll very rapidly like stroke over again and again and again and break the skin vessels. I mean, I think it does probably help the muscles. I don't know if it helped the parasites at all, but it did kind of feel like a massage. I didn't mind it. But they're like that kind of like service to other people. That's very normal for them. They give each other massage all the time. Somebody would say, "Oh, I'm sore," and it was kind of like the expectation. You'd pick up the sore area and start trying to help massage out their arm or whatever it is, and they would do the same to you in return. It was a beautiful culture to be a part of. There's Cranky Grandma. Cranky Grandma had no sense of personal space. She was always a little bit inappropriate. You know, some days she'd come over and accuse me of being a total flirt, and then some days she'd come over and accuse us of being horrid people who were like here to steal things, and then some days she'd come over and be sweet as pie. That was her trying on a shirt we were giving her, and she was very happy with this new shirt. And she was layering that shirt on top of 2 other shirts. I think she wore that shirt out, actually. I don't quite understand the layering thing. To this day, it still puzzles me. I am extremely hot standing up here. I did kind of want to turn off the air conditioning, but I'm not going to lie, I didn't fight for it very hard. I like the air conditioning. Let's see. This is on the right. Let's see. That's Kotiet, and then right over there, you can't really see them, but that's Navi. They were the 2 baptized members of the Cham. So there has been an Adventist AFM presence with the Cham people for about 15 years, and there's a lot of interest, and there is a lot of breakthrough, but so far, there's not a lot of people who are willing to publicly leave the Muslim faith and announce to people that they are a Christian now. And part of this is very culturally based. They're all Muslim. This is something that's like something that sets them apart as a minority group from the Khmer, and they're very proud of this. They're very proud of their culture, and so we could understand that. So part of the respect that we showed them was when we went into their houses and we went into their villages, we would wear the headscarves. Again, I was not a huge fan. But we did it anyway, because even though it was extremely hot for us, and I sometimes found myself trying to wet down my neck underneath the hijab, or wet down my hair before I put the hijab on, because it helped a little bit with the heat. It was very helpful for them to see that we respected their culture and their values. So these 2 young men, they've been trying to reach their village, but they're also working as day laborers, and they have families. It's a very wonderful culture, but it's very difficult to try to find the best way to reach them. I'm still praying about that. And this was my mission family. They were so patient with us. That was right after we helped a family plant rice field for the day. Again, a thoroughly enjoyable process, planting rice fields. Not one I really would love to repeat often. It was very hard, very backbreaking work. And the water, I mean, honestly, it was not clean water. It was very like, the whole time I was in there, I was just like, okay, they all do this. Just because they all get sick all the time will not mean you'll get sick all the time too. It's okay. But I did get sick a lot due to just over there. I think you have to have a stomach of steel to survive past childhood, They say it takes about 7 years to build up a stomach tolerance from a first world country to a third world country, and I fully believe it. I got parasites about 7, 8 times. I had an amoeba once for about a month before we finally realized what it was and were able to treat it. And that was the worst. I think I dropped 10 pounds with the amoeba because you just don't want to eat. And every time you do even take like one bite of food, I'd get really nauseous. So I just really didn't eat for about a month before I was finally like, okay, I should probably get this looked into. It was a really adventurous year, guys. This was a grandma and grandpa that I discovered on one of my morning walks. They all thought I was crazy because I would go out and walk in the morning, just like a very little walk before it got really hot, probably half a mile. But it just kept me sane. And I met them. They thought I was utterly insane walking out in the morning early for no apparent reason. So they called me over to their house and I met them and got to be friends with them. I think she had some sort of dementia and he was looking after her. That's what I heard later on from the family. But they were very sweet. This was one of the trips that we took to Phnom Penh. I knew all of those little ladies. They all used to come over to our house, sometimes all at once in group. And it was very overwhelming, but it was fun getting to know them. Lots of traveling that I did. This was a little meal that they had for us. It was a local delicacy, honestly. It was like this crepe, and they put bean sprouts in with it. Really good, amazing food. This was a very normal site. They're not supposed to do this with the wood. This is protected wood, illegal wood, but they would transport it all over the country just like this and then just bribe the officials to look the other way. This was a temple that we went to at Angkor Wat, and it was a practicing temple that they still used. The Khmer are mostly Buddhist. They seemed to find some comfort from it. It felt very sad to me. It was just this statue, looking at it from a Christian perspective. Angkor Wat. That was me at the only cool area. See, it was 59 degrees there. Look at me. I'm freezing. Can't you tell? Freezing to death. This was I'm not quite sure what that was actually. This is something. Anyway, so being a missionary, yes. Beyond the parasites and the amoeba and the frankly crippling homesickness and the culture shock, being a missionary was a wonderful experience. It forced me to get outside of my comfort zone. I think God knew that I really needed this year abroad. I think that God used me to help reach people that they would not have otherwise been able to reach. And I know that there was a purpose for me being over there. I still have moments every once in a while, I'm like, okay, God, that was the thing that you had me do. I still don't quite know why. But this was me right after my 4th motorcycle wreck. You gotta smile through the pain, guys. This was a woman who really took care of me. While I was living with a local family for the last few months in Tanout, she would come over and make sure I was okay every once in a while and fuss at me, kind of an older sister. Hasima was her name, and she was wonderful. She hated having her picture taken. They don't think they're pretty over there. It's really sad. I don't know, that was a real jarring moment for me. I had somebody over one day and I just looked at her and I'm like, oh, you're so pretty. And she's like, oh, no, I'm not pretty. I'm so dark. And that was it. That's all she would accept. I could insist up and down that they were all very beautiful. And they were like, no, we're super ugly. And they just say that about themselves. And I'm like, okay, no, you're not. So I think a lot of, I very gently tried to reassure people that I would meet, the women especially. I didn't actually have a lot of contact with the males because it's a very divided male and female society, and you don't want to give the wrong impression, especially in that area, that you're interested in a male as a young single female. So it was a lot of hello from across the room to males, but the females were very interesting. I stayed the night at a couple of different houses. That was the missionary girl. Again, extremely hot. Don't miss the hijabs. That was 19 people in a truck. We were very proud of that. I think we were trying to squeeze like one more person in, but then somebody else last minute decided, oh, it's okay, I'll just take my moto. And then they squeezed like 3 people onto the moto. Yeah. That's travel in Cambodia right there. And they all don't like being inside in the air conditioning very much. They don't like the air conditioning. They think it makes them sick. Which, to be fair, the filtering system is not the best, and if you do spend too much time in the air conditionings over there, I would notice my nose would get all stopped up. So I just mostly went without air conditioning while I was over there. But honestly, it was about the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And when they asked me to stay on another year, I prayed about it, and I was just like, I think I was also just praying, God, please don't make me stay another year. God, please don't make me stay another year. I don't think I can. I don't think I can do this. I don't think I'm like emotionally equipped to stay here another year, frankly. And God listens to us every once in a while. I think he probably could have used me, but I think he also had a different plan for me. And so I did end up coming home and not staying on another year. But I was not always a missionary when I was over there. And I think people always get a little confused when I say that. But if you think about it, being a missionary is not like something you do. Being a missionary is something that we are all called to be every day of our lives as somebody who witnesses to the power and love of God. And I was not a missionary every day of my life over there. I had moments right after I broke my foot. Did I mention that? I don't know if I actually mentioned that. I broke my foot while I was over there. It was an extremely pleasant experience trying to navigate with crutches around a third world country. Right after I broke my foot, which came right after I'd had the amoeba and lost 10 pounds, I definitely had a moment where I just like sat on my bed and threw something against the wall and was like, that's it, I'm going home. That was about 6 months in. I didn't want to be there anymore. I was done. Totally done at that point. And I kind of knew that all of this was like Satan prodding and attacking, but I was still just like, you know what, this is ridiculous. I could be home, I could be making money, I could be in air conditioning. This is ridiculous. What am I doing here? But I think God uses us even in those moments of weakness that we have. And God takes care of his people too. When Elijah ran away and ended up under this tree way away from where he was meant to be, God sent food to him. God sent water. He let him rest, told him to go to get some sleep, and it would look better. God takes care of his broken down children too. And I think that was something I really learned there. Like, to be a missionary, you're not this perfect person. You don't have your life together. You're just as human as you guys all sitting right here. Not that you're not perfect people. I don't know you. You might be wonderful and perfect. Statistically, probably unlikely, but I don't know you. That was the hardest realization, I think, for me, being a missionary overseas. I would have days, especially with the frequent visitors, we would have moments where we'd lock up the house and we'd take our shoes inside with us, so it would look like we were gone, and we'd just lock up the house for the day. That was not missionary-like behavior. I will fully admit that. That was very human. I'm done with human interaction. I need like 5 minutes to breathe. I need some me time. Not Christ-like behavior. And I can admit that now, looking back on that. But at the time, it felt like this very necessary thing that we had to do in order to maintain some sort of sanity in this very different culture that you were thrust into. So, it was the hardest year of my life. I think I definitely had like full-on weeks where I was like, is there even a God? Really? Like, what am I even doing here? I don't even know if I fully believe in this. I definitely was, Satan will use every single doubt that you have and that you've ever let yourself have for a minute, and then just pick at it and pick and pick and pick. And you'll find you'll have moments where you're just really doubting yourself. But I think what got me through more than anything else was just, God didn't give up on me. When I was like really, really homesick and living with a Cham family in the middle of Ramadan and trying to like sneak some food in the middle of the day while they're all fasting, I had this moment. I'd taken my motorcycle out to this country road, and I was just sitting there looking up at a tree, and I'm like, I know I'm going home in a month, and I know that I've been through a lot, God, but I just don't know if I can do another month. Can I just go home now, please? So really just trying not to check out and trying to be there emotionally for people and trying to just figure out how to identify with people. That was a real struggle for me too. And to be honest, I think I probably didn't always succeed. I think I probably failed a lot while I was over there. But I think what I really realized the most was that even in all my failure and even in all my moments of weakness and failure, I said that already, God was using me. God was there. God was overreaching. In every moment of surrender I had, God was able to work. In every day that I was there and putting in the effort, God was able to reach out to people. In this little video I'm going to show you, this was a gentleman that we met, and I hung out with his wife a few times, and he is now a regular member. He's going to church and he's studying the Bible. I had no idea at the time. Like at the time, he seemed totally uninterested. He didn't even like his wife really hanging out with me very much. I think he was just like, who's this weird white girl? Why is she here? And I'm honestly trying to remember her name. She's super sweet. And she had this little boy who would come over and run around on the ground with us. So that kind of work, that's very encouraging to me. And a lot of what I did, I'm pretty sure I will never know until heaven what kind of impact I had, what kind of work that I was able to accomplish. And I think it's like that in life too. I want to encourage everyone to take a moment, like in all of our frailty, you're here because God loved you enough to die for you. And because of that, we live for him. And because of that, we're a little bit different. And we have a Savior, and we profess to having a Savior. And I think that gets across to people, even in ways we may not realize until heaven. That's been the most encouraging thing to me looking back, because at the moment, I think by the time I left Cambodia, I was just like, okay, God, that was my year. I don't know. Hopefully you were able to use me. Because I don't know, in the moment, it felt like a lot of fumbling and stumbling, like a toddler trying to take steps and then tripping and falling, and taking another step and tripping and falling again. So I'm going to show you this video. And if you guys have any questions before I show this video about what I did there, I think I've kind of skipped through my year. Anyone have any questions or comments? No? I was that good. That's what I'm going to say. All right, this is that. And the missionaries who are over there now, Carly and Eric Tirado and Stephanie and Josh Lewis, they could really use your prayers, and if you feel called, your financial support. The Tirados, especially Eric, broke both of his ankles, and he's in his last week of the cast there. He's been in double casts for 8 weeks in the middle of summer near the equator. I've been praying for him. But his spirits are up, and this is Vat, the man I was telling you about, who's now coming to church.
Welcome to Cambodia, to the Cham project, where your missionaries Joshua, Stephanie, Carly, and Eric are. Today we want to introduce you to our friend Vat, a smart young man who lives just next door. Recently he started coming to church regularly and stays after for fellowship and spends time reading the Bible with us. He's been also teaching Eric how to read the Bible in Cambodian after church. In the week, you'll find him involved with soccer games and sports with his friends. He recently came back from Malaysia working as a fish packer. Let's go to his house and talk to him about it. This is where they take showers and do their laundry. That's their supply of rice. They have it netted off so that they can plunk it in there. Now let's go upstairs and talk to him for a bit. The floor of their house is hardwood slats and the air flows easily through. Because these walls are unfinished, this is a temporary kitchen setup, they said. They have a simple drinking water filter and a gas stove. They can also cook over the fire. Here are some of their cooking ingredients: fermented fish and palm sugar. For the Great River people, fish is a big part of their diet, as well as rice, which they eat 3 times a day. Vat's family are Cham Muslims, which is our target people group to share the gospel with. They pray 5 times a day and have just finished fasting for the month of Ramadan. So this would be the prayer rug that they would use for saying their prayers. And these white clothes beside me are what the women wear for their prayer shawls.
2 ឆ្នាំហ្នឹងទៅម៉ាឡេ3ឆ្នាំទៅជាប់គ្នាគាត់ថាបើថាគិតទៅនៅហើយប្រហែលឆ្នាំគិតទៅធ្វើការម៉ាឡេទៅអនាគតក៏ហៅធ្វើការយូរទៀតចូលចិត្តបើថាជាយូរទៀតហើយមានមតិឯនោះច្រើនចិនទៅច្រើនចិនគេយកត្រីទៅហូបនៅប្រទេសចិននឹងប្រហែលជាយកទៅខុបទេហើយគេយកទៅដាក់ទូក្លាសេឲ្យវារឹងហើយហើយប្រព័ន្ធគិតថាមិនទៅប្តីទៅឆ្ងាយចឹង
After talking for a little while about family, they showed us their wedding album. A typical Cham wedding is a 2 or 3 day feast where guests come and go. The bride will change her dress several times each day, and Vat would have had to save up several $100s for the dowry. That's a little bit about Vat and his family. Please pray for Vat that he will come to know Christ as his personal Savior. And continue to pray for the Great River people as we share the gospel with them day by day.
So that was a video about just what they do. This is friendship evangelism is not always something that's glamorous. It's not something that's very fast, but in between times, they managed to take a little time. I know that picture. That was right before they moved. Josh and Stephanie have been building their own little place, and Eric and Carly are going to be staying at where I was teaching English. So now they're staying there, and Eric is stuck on the first floor. So I'm praying it doesn't flood quite yet, because the first floor is not a place you want to be in the middle of flood season, when it's very, very hot. That's what we did. AFM is all about various different ways to reach people where they are and respecting their culture. It was a growing year for me. If anyone is thinking about going off as a missionary for a year, let me know. I will be happy to talk to you and encourage you. And I'm just saying, guys, if I can do it, anyone can. I'm a mess. Like, I filed my taxes and then I forgot to file state taxes until like a week and a half ago. So if I can do it, guys, I think anyone can. All right, now, if that's all, I'm rather hot and not Muslim. So I'm just saying, picture it, guys, 100 degrees and you wear this all the time. All the time. And they do it for merit. Muslims, it's a very merit-based religion. I actually really respect them. I think they have a lot of strong values. They have a lot of family values. Yes.
How did you create the women over there?
Nope. Nope. No. I will say, like, I think there's probably some submission going on, but women were able to own land. They bought, they bartered. Women, especially in the Cham society, women traditionally are the ones who are the heads of the family. So in their society, especially, it would have been almost unheard of for a woman to not be wanted. They didn't understand it at all. We were talking to them about how in certain areas of the world, women were considered not wanted and people would like get rid of their girl babies. And they didn't understand it at all. They were like, what, but how? Why would you ever do that? So, especially in their area. I know, yes. So his question is a good one. Once you accept the Lord, how did people react? So for Navi and Kotiet, the two baptized members, their family still communicated with them. They weren't excommunicated, but there was definitely a lot of like, oh, what are you doing with life? What do you mean? What do you mean you're not Muslim? You're still Muslim, right? Like you believe in this Jesus fellow, sure, but you're still Muslim, right? You still believe in the prophet? So I don't think there's not a lot of family support. It's a difficult thing to leave, not just one's religion, but honestly, it's like a cultural religion. There's not a lot of very strict Muslims there, but there's lots of cultural beliefs. Yes.
In other words, there's been a walk through it. You become a Christian. You become a walk because you're Muslim and Christian. We walk through it. There's a family.
People, I'm sorry, what?
There's a family. There's a big walk with them. You become a Christian.
Yeah, it makes it very difficult for them. Yeah. Anyone else have any other questions? Comments?
Watching
Booze?
the news, it seems to me that it's very dangerous for them in that area, in any of that area over in there, to become a Christian because Islam, the radicals.
Oh, that's more in Indonesia. So the area I was in, they kind of knew about the radicals, but like everyone very politely thought they were crazy. Like, there's not a lot of radicalization going on. You would see there was like one or two groups of women with the full hijab thing in black because no color is sinful. And you would see these women. I kind of got to know one of the women a little bit as far as I was able to, who was a part of one of the families, and she was really sweet, but she had very strict guidelines to how she dressed outside of the home, even beyond the usual strict. Most Cham women, I kind of did the extreme for you guys up here, but most Cham women, like when they're going out in the market or something, they'll just go like this. That's it. They might just leave it even down, and they'll use the end of their headscarves as like a little purse and tie things in it. It's really cute, actually. I kind of miss my headscarf every once in a while. Not all the time, especially in the summer. But if you're having a bad hair day or something, it was nice. It was a kind of nice thing to rely on. It's very cultural. I think if I ever did live in an area like a very Muslim country where every woman wore a headscarf, I wouldn't have an issue wearing a headscarf because you'd be considered immodest if you didn't wear a headscarf. Any other questions?
One more. Is that grandma there? Is that cultural or is that cultural because of Muslim?
Cultural because they're Muslim. The Khmer do not wear these. No. I would get questions if I ever did wear a headscarf out to the market. I would get questions like, "Are you Muslim?" So I didn't wear a headscarf very often outside of Cham areas, except I was having a really bad hair day. All right. Do we pray and then closing song, then prayer? I can't remember. Thank you very much, guys. If you have any questions, I'm around.
Let's all stand. 373. Now there's a guy's part and a gal's part. So
He's up here.
Mike is stepping in for his son, who would normally help me. So he's going to do the guy's part. 373. Seeking the lost, yes, kindly entreating, wanderers on the mountains astray, come unto read his message repeating, words of the Master speaking today.
Going afar,
Going afar, upon the mountain, bringing the wonders back again,
into the fold,
of my Redeemer,
Jesus the Lamb,
Jesus the Lamb, for sinners slain, seeking the lost and pointing to Jesus, souls that are weak and hearts that are sore, leading them forth in ways of salvation, showing a path to life evermore.
going afar,
Going afar, upon the mountain,
bringing the one
bringing the wonders back again,
into the fold,
of my Redeemer,
Jesus the Lamb,
Jesus the Lamb of sinners slain, for sinners slain. Thus I would go on missions of mercy, following Christ from day unto day, cheering the faint and raising the fallen, pointing the lost to Jesus the way.
going afar,
Going afar, upon the mountain,
bringing the one
bringing the wonders back again,
into the fold,
of my Redeemer,
Jesus the Lamb,
Jesus the Lamb, for sinners slain,
Let's bow our heads and pray today. Father, you know that every single one of us are on a different path and a different journey in our lives, but that we are all brought together here by one commonality, and that commonality is you. You died on a cross for us, and through that, you gave us the Great Commission, Matthew 28:18 through 20, go into all the world. The world is a horrid and huge place with many different corners and crevices, some of them less pleasant than others. And Father, that I pray for our missionaries who are out on the front lines. I pray for us reaching our neighbors right now. Sometimes reaching neighbors can be harder than reaching souls across the ocean sometimes. And Father, I pray that we remember through all of our frailty, we are not relying on our own strength in any way. We're relying on you, our Savior, who leads the way and brings us further than we could ever imagine. Father, I pray for the missionaries currently working with the Cham group specifically. I pray for the people there. You know them deeply and more intimately than I could ever imagine knowing them. And I pray that you will open their minds and hearts and lead them to you.